Welcome. I'm Sister Who. Growing up in Catholic school, about 40 days after Easter, there was a celebration called the Feast of the Ascension, when, kind of in memory of when, as recorded in the New Testament section of the Bible, Jesus Christ ascended bodily, in a physical body up into heaven. And when I was in college, I recall reading somewhere of, I think it was in Germany, where they were cleaning up the rubble and such, and found a statue of Christ that had fallen over and the hands had broken off. And they wondered what to do about it for a while, and then finally decided to put it up as it was, and to simply put a plaque in front of it that said, "Christ has no hands but ours." And reflecting on my understanding of the Ascension, that Jesus was taken up bodily into heaven, it seems to me that if the incarnation of Christ is to continue on earth, it will be done by people or not at all. Whatever your beliefs, Christian, Buddhist, atheist, whatever labels people place upon us, or more especially we place upon ourselves, we become a reference point. Often I guess when I go out, people ask me if I'm not concerned that this will be a negative reflection on all gay people. And I said, well, it couldn't possibly be. I have no way of representing all gay people. No one, in a sense we're tied to labels associated with us. In a sense we're not. We become reference points. Each gay person that John Doe or Mr. John Q. Public meets becomes a reference point. The more gay people that Mr. John Q. Public meets, the more he has an understanding of the range of people that are encompassed within the term gay. And the same could be said of any other label. The more people in America someone from a foreign country meets, the more they have an understanding of what the word American means. What is an American? Well, looking at the range of people in this country, I think that would be a really hard one to figure out who represents America. I don't think anybody could. I don't think any woman could represent all women. I don't think any child could represent all children. I don't think any one race could represent all races. There's just too much diversity. But to me, it's a wonderful thing that there is this range of diversity. It means we have more tools. It means we have more ways of looking at things. It's like a multifaceted stone. Each different facet shining light in a different direction in a different way, but each one shining light nevertheless. I was talking with someone about the different facets of God once, and this may sound like a really silly analogy, but it was the only one I could think of at the time, and it seems to have a certain pattern to it that, good for at least a little bit anyway. I know it's been so long, I wonder if anybody will remember now, but when I was in high school, I took a typing class, and they had these old electric IBM Selectric typewriters that had this ball in there that had all the letters of the alphabet and all the characters from the typewriter keyboard on this ball. And somehow, no matter what you hit, it was like the ball would immediately pivot, and that exact spot would hit the paper. And it would happen so fast you couldn't hardly even see it move. Well, in the same way, there may be times where I need to see God as a man of some sort. And like that one single sphere, suddenly it's like it pivots and I connect with that one facet of the sphere that shows God as man. And maybe the next day I need to see God as woman, and the sphere pivots a different way, and suddenly I connect with God as woman. And maybe another time it's as a genderless great spirit, and That's another facet I connect with. And it happens so fast, it's like I don't even see the sphere move. And it's the same one sphere through all of this. And I guess that's why, to me, it's okay to understand that there is one God. And all the different ways we have of perceiving, it's just all different facets, all different figures on the side of the sphere, just like the typewriter ball. And the more different ways we look at God, the more different ways we have of relating to God, and the broader our experience gets, the more complete the language that can show up on the page gets. And the more things we add, like my Afghan, the bigger it gets, and the larger size bed it covers. And what may be enough to barely keep my legs warm this week may be enough to cover my whole body in a couple weeks in the future. Or it may make a wonderful present to someone to let them know how special they are to me, how much I appreciate what they've contributed to my life. It's interesting that the argument as to what is natural, I guess what makes it all the more amusing is that we're still discovering things, and so really we're not in any place to say what is natural. The minute we say something couldn't happen, someone figures out a way to do it. I recall reading someplace that it was an uncle of Orville and Wilbur Wright, who was a minister, who made the statement that if man were meant to fly, he'd have been born with wings. And then here his nephews are the ones to invent the first airplane that actually works. Too often, it seems to me throughout history, institutionalized Christianity has been on the cutting edge of oppression. And I think that's part of, it's something that needs to be included, and not something that can say, well, we won't talk about that because we don't like that part of ourselves. It's part of what the word Christian means to a lot of people around the world. Like an Afghan, I can proceed in whatever color, in whatever direction I want. But if I were to take this apart, it is one string from the edge all the way to the center. One continuous thread that runs through all of it. And it changes, it grows in size, it goes through different patterns, it goes through different cycles. Sometimes I tie on a new color, but it's the same thread. If I disown the center, I don't have an Afghan that I can put on the bed. If I disown the past, I don't have something I can work with. As a Christian, if I disown the history of Christianity, I don't have a complete understanding of what Christianity is. At the same time, I found it very liberating in my journey back to myself, as I sometimes call it. Growing up in a small town where everything was defined for me. And after high school, beginning this journey back where I got to define who I was going to be as an adult, what I believed in, how I made choices, how I lived. To a certain extent, even my own patterns of behavior. Well, it was liberating to me to when it finally occurred to me that I don't have to be only the result of my past actions, that I don't have to be only 2 + 2 = 4. Because I'm a person created in God's image, I can add something of my own, so that maybe I was given 2 + 2, but I can add 3 and come up with 7 instead of 4. I don't have to be just what is, I don't have to be only the total of what has happened to me in the past. I can be more than what I've been in the past. I can be more than what's happened to me. I can be more than all the bad things that have happened to me. I can even be more than all the good things that have happened to me. It's a growth, a way of stretching yourself, an openness to becoming more than you are, not letting the patterns that you've lived with be the only patterns you ever know. Every so often, just to, challenge myself, just to create new avenues, new ways of growing, new ways of being. One of my favorite things is to go hiking. And every so often, I just simply pull out a map and look for a trail I haven't been on. And find new streams, new bridges, new valleys, new trees, new mountaintops, new things, new ways that the land is laid out. And in discovering that newness, I can bring a sense of newness within myself as well. And I can bring a new sense of newness to the way I relate to others and the way I relate to God. I was hiking once with someone who knew a lot about different mountain flowers and things. And at one point he stopped and pointed down to this thing about, probably 4 or 5 inches in diameter. It was just a little circle of green on the ground. And it had little white flowers around the edge of it. And he said, that one only blooms every 7 years. And I stopped to consider for a moment what it must be like to live on this mountainside, be buried with 6 feet of snow in the winter, never see anything warmer than 45 or 50 degrees in the summer, and cling to this rock with no apparent dirt around, or very little anyway, for 7 years, just to put up one summer's worth of flowers. And it gave me a very different sense of time and what is normal and what is life. And I mean, after it puts all this strength into blooming, it takes 7 years for it to recuperate before it can bloom again. Turning to relationships and things in my life and saying, okay, fine, what does that teach me? I suppose the obvious one, is to be patient, but it seems to me there's a lot more to it than that. There's things about understanding that the environment and the place in which I am is not an accident. It does fit into the world around me somehow. It may not be where I always am, but there is value in believing in something even when it doesn't produce immediate fruit, or even when it doesn't blossom right away. There is still a reason to believe in life and to believe that things really are going someplace. Sometimes it feels things are not, and I need to be patient. And sometimes it seems things are not going places, and I discover that the world is turning and I've stopped moving. To follow with the analogy of hiking in the mountains, it's nice to go to a mountain, it's nice to see things, it's nice to visit the mountaintop, it's nice to photograph flowers, but when the storm clouds roll in, it's time to get off the mountaintop. It's not a safe place for a person to be when the storm comes. It's where the flower belongs, even as the storm passes. But it's not a safe place for a person to be. And so it is all these different characteristics, each thing suited for its own little environment. And I find myself at times asking, well, what is a gay nun to do in Billings, Montana, for crying out loud? Well, I suppose that's a fair question. I suppose it's a question I'll never get finished answering. My full name is Sister Who Does She Think She Is? That being the case, the questions of identity, I think, are things that transcend place and time. They're things that people have been asking since the beginning of humanity. Things that I'm sure there are people in Billings asking. Things that people in New York City and everywhere around the world ask. Who do I think I am, and what does that have to do with how I present myself to the world? Do I think I'm an artist? Do I think I have an aptitude for art? Do I think that I can't sing and that I should go into business? Do I think that I need to get married in order to be complete? There are all sorts of things that affect how we interact with others in this life. What do I believe about God? Who do I think I am in relation to God? Do I think I'm God's child? To borrow some negative propaganda that's out there, I'll call it. One of the things that numerous gay people have to come to terms with is internalized homophobia. Something inside of them that says, I don't want to be gay because that pastor or that church says that gayness is the sin that makes God puke. And I think how sad, how tragic that organization that has aligned itself with Jesus Christ, a man who stood for love in an extreme example. A love that none of us has ever been able to match. And then by saying this, to create a world in which this person will grow up hating themselves, thinking of themselves as the one that God hates, the one that makes God sick. And I just find that so sad. Because the God I know, in 1 John we're told quite directly that God is love. And that whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. I don't know that those who wish to exclude gay people, I don't know that there's a convenient way to insist or to come up with some bizarre word game, I guess, to recognize that there is genuine love between gay men and between lesbians, and that God is not in that. I think the tangled web of words and doctrines that become necessary to uphold such a doctrine, to me, make it all the more reasonable, all the more loving, all the more compassionate to say maybe it's I who don't understand, rather than God who has to live within my theology. It seemed to me that for any one person who has ever lived, to write an autobiography of that person and to know that person and then read the autobiography, there is no book that can contain the completeness of who and what that person was or is. That being the case, even 66 books in the Bible, I cannot understand as being able to include all that God is. And so I choose to believe in God whom the Bible talks about, but not God only as the Bible describes. I think God is more than what's written in the Bible. Just as any person is more than what their autobiography or what their biography or what 10 biographies of them could contain. There's always more to it. And the nice thing to me about having an open-ended belief system is that then there are places to grow and new directions to expand in. You know, when in the biblical story of creation, I don't see any problem with it because it doesn't need to be a destination. It can be an allegory, it can be an actual history, even as an actual history. If God created Adam and Eve in some literal sense, fine, but it doesn't say that it has to end there. Adam and Eve may have been two straight people, but most of the gay people I know have straight parents. What I see in God creating Adam and Eve is that he created two directions of humanity to grow in. Two complex human beings that in their combinations could create even more complexities, one thing building on another and upon another and upon another, until it spreads out into a diversity of humanity that's beyond anyone's comprehension. You know, before we had a lot of international travel and communication, groups of people stayed more separate. And you could say, well, this is a Caucasian race, this is a Negroid race, this is a Mongoloid race, this is whatever race. Now, as there's more and more intermarrying going on, you have people who are combinations of all these things. People who are bringing together the best qualities of several races. And I think that's pretty doggone wonderful. You know, Adam and Eve, it says, had lots of children. I don't see anything that has any problem with them having some gay children along with some straight children. Having some sons who were gay and some daughters who were lesbian and some sons who were straight and some daughters who were straight. And it just provides more opportunities and more directions to grow and more ways to be creative and more beautiful things to bring together and more possibilities. There are so many different things to do. And I understand that in Billings, in lots of cities and towns across the United States, around the world, there are a lot of things that aren't readily available. Sometimes we need to travel to other places to have certain creative opportunities, to have certain connections. To me, that's okay. The problem that, well, I wouldn't say it's a problem. Looking at my own growing up, when I was real small, the world to me was a house on 3 acres in the country about 2 miles from town. And when I got into grade school, the world included a Catholic school building that I hadn't been in before, and included this route between the two places. But there were a lot of areas of the town that I really didn't know about, and so to me they weren't real. And then got into high school and started to understand the whole county in which I grew up and the town and a lot more areas of the town. And then I got out of high school and I went to New York City, and suddenly my world became really big and included half of a nation. And then a number of years later, quite a number of years later, I finally got to travel to Europe. And my perception, my definition of the word world got so big. I guess wherever we grow up, wherever we are, is to remember how much more we're connected to. That just as in our life, there was something that came before, there's a place where we are, and there's some place that we're going to. In the world, there's a place where we stand, there's a place where we've been, there's a place we'll travel to. There's always something more connected to this present moment. It's not, what we see is not all there is. The part of ourselves that we know is not the only part of ourselves that exists. the part of God that we know is not all that there is to God. The part that has been described in theology is not, no one has the last word on theology, the last word on what God is, or what spirituality is, or what spiritual growth is, or how things work. And just at the time when we think we might have the final word, everything grows and changes. Suddenly someone invents a new kind of computer, or discovers an animal in Australia or wherever that they didn't know existed, or discovers a particular kind of fish that they swore died out 10,000 years ago, and lo and behold, here's one that's alive. There's always something new and wonderful. And I think God intended it that way, though I have to admit, He took an awful risk in creating us. I think in the creation of mankind, God embraced His own vulnerability, because He knew, to be blunt, just how much we could screw things up. But He also knew just how much more incredible everything could be if He gave us a chance. And so I go through life trying to remember that no matter how much someone might have hurt me, no matter how confused someone might sound to me, I still need to give them the chance to do the right thing. And I need to be ready to revise my understanding of what the right thing is, because I too am learning and growing and hoping that people will give me the opportunity to do the right thing, whether I have in the past or not.
Thank you for joining us. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen.